anti-gay man named Elliot Morales shot a gay man in the face. Police say homophobic slurs were used before the point-blank shooting, and that the alleged murderer, Elliot Morales, who is being charged with murder and weapons charges, also was following Mark Carson, 32-year-old Mark Carson, who is the victim. Morales trailed and taunted the men, yelling anti-gay slurs, asking one of them, "You want to die tonight?" according to the New York Times. Police found Carson fatally wounded on the pavement, pronounced dead upon arrival to Beth Israel Hospital.
In August, police arrested Paris Wilson in the beating of a 21-year-old transgender Harlem woman. Alon Nettles died in a coma days later. Wilson made his first court appearance Tuesday. His misdemeanor charges were dropped, and the case changed into a homicide investigation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Handelman, host of Criminal Justice Matters. Today is a really, really special program for us, a departure. Instead of shooting in our John Jay studios, we've invited students and professors to engage in a town hall conversation at the Gerald W. Lynch Theater at John Jay about one of the great and most serious civil rights challenges of our time. And that is the right of gay, bisexual, lesbian, and transgender people to live their lives without fear of discrimination. It's a major issue, and to talk about that, we've got a special guest. He's Kevin Nadal. He's an associate professor of psychology at John Jay. He's an academic author who specializes in psychology, mental health, and educational issues. He also has a secret other life. He's a part-time comedian and a performance artist. He's appeared widely on TV, and in 2006, People magazine named him the hottest bachelor of the year. He's recently written a book called That's So Gay, which we've shamelessly used as the title of our show and our program today. Kevin, you have the floor.
Thanks, Steve. So I do have to correct you, Steve. I was one of People magazine's hottest bachelors, not the, even though to you all, I'm sure I am the hottest. I am going to talk a little bit today about microaggressions. How many people here have heard of the term microaggressions before? Great, so some of you have, and one of the reasons why we've heard a little bit about microaggressions is because it has been publicized a little bit in the media, and we're hoping that today we can get the word out even more. Before we talk about microaggressions, I first want to just start off a little bit about my life and talk a little bit about where I came from. I'm the youngest son of immigrant parents. As you can see, I'm the cutest of my brothers, and I came from a family who immigrated here in the 1960s from the Philippines. Coming from the Philippines, my family was very traditional. They upheld a lot of Filipino and Catholic cultural values. And so you can imagine struggling with my sexual identity from such a young age that I may not have learned that it was okay to be gay. In fact, I may have learned that it was bad, that it was evil, that it was morally wrong. And so as a kid, it was very difficult for me to come out of the closet. Being the youngest of three boys, we were taught to like a lot of sports and to be really into traditionally masculine things. So not only were we taught to be men and to not cry, and the message is that boys don't cry, we also played basketball and baseball and every other masculine sport that you can think of. As you can see, I didn't like playing sports. I was so upset. This is my basketball uniform. I'm sure there were pants involved, but I wanted to make it into a mini. And I was miserable. I hated being traditionally masculine. I would rather be in my art classes, in my dance classes, and in choir. And in fact, I was happiest when I could pretend I was a runway model, or when I could dance. On the left is me serving you fierce 7-year-old realness, and on the right is me in a modern jazz dance class because I begged my parents to put me into modern jazz dance. Now, when I came out in my 20s, when my parents were confused when I told them I was gay, I said, I took modern jazz dance when I was 7 years old. I was a kid who was happy most of the time. And again, this pose is called Fierce Realness Part 2. And I was happy. I loved life. I loved my family, but I held on to a secret. I held on to the fact that I was gay. I held on to the fact that I had to hold on to this identity, and that I didn't ever think that I would ever fully be able to come out of the closet. And so this happy kid actually wasn't happy all all the time. And this happy kid actually went through what a lot of LGBT kids go through, things like depression, suicidal ideation, and experimentation with substance abuse. I think one of the other reasons why it was so difficult for me to come out of the closet was because I had to deal with microaggressions. Microaggressions, as some of you might know, are these subtle everyday behaviors that send negative messages to people based on various identities, and in this case, their LGBTQ identity. I recently wrote a book called That's So Gay, which was published last year, and in BuzzFeed, I submitted some photos that were featured in this BuzzFeed article. You all like BuzzFeed? Yeah, see, the young people, you all love BuzzFeed. When I was your age, we had newspapers. So I asked people to submit examples of microaggressions in their everyday life. This first young man says that people have said to him, no homo. So similar to That's So Gay, no homo is a very common phrase that people use. And basically what it means is that when a heterosexual man touches another man, that by saying no homo, that magically makes him not gay. Which is funny because when you were touching my tie or helping me fix my collar, you had gay thoughts the entire time, which probably makes you a little gay. The next slide is this woman who says that men sometimes say to her, that's cool as long as I can watch. Now, heterosexual men, I don't know why you think it's okay to go up to beautiful young women or queer women, bisexual women, and tell them that it's okay, or that you want to join a three-way with them. They don't want a three-way with you. Look how beautiful this woman is. Do you think she wants to go with your beautiful, unbeautiful, mediocre-looking self? This man says that he often gets approached by people who assume that because he's gay, he would be attracted to everybody. Sometimes the men will come up to me and say, hey, Kevin, that's cool that you're gay, but just keep your hands off of me. And I'm like, seriously, look at me and look at you. This woman says that sometimes people ask her, who's the man in the relationship? And the answer is, no one, they're lesbians. This person says that this person's oftentimes told that I'm not being homophobic, you're just being too sensitive. No, you are being homophobic, and you're actually an asshole too. This person works at John Jay, and his quote is that somebody has said to him, you're so Jack on Will and Grace, and his answer is actually, no, I'm Grace. I know what you mean, I'm actually Rosario. And my question that I get a lot is I'm at a public event and somebody will say, hey, so where are your wife and kids? And I say, in my parents' imagination. Thank you.
That's great, Kevin. That's great. So let's have a little bit of a discussion before we open it up to questions. So what's the beef here? I mean, gays, lesbians, bisexual people are so much out in our society today. They're in the U.S. Army, the U.S. Army generals, they host talk shows, they do performance artists. So what's the issue with microaggressions? Why should we have to worry about that? That's human nature, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we have made a lot of significant strides for equality in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. And I think because of that, a lot of times people will say, that's not an issue anymore, that's something we don't need to worry about. The problem is that there still is significant systemic, institutional, interpersonal discrimination against LGBT people that still occurs on an everyday basis. I mean, the clips alone just showed that hate crimes are still rampant and on the rise. And even here in New York City, the place that we like to think of as being the most diverse and multicultural place in the universe is still a place where LGBTQ people can't come out of the closet and live their lives the way they'd like to.
But you can't criminalize microaggressions, right?
That's the difficult part about microaggressions. We have laws that protect against hate crimes. We have laws that protect against sexual harassment or racial discrimination in the workplace. But in most states, if you were to discriminate against an LGBT person, it would be legal. And that's why we're trying to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. And with microaggressions specifically, they don't quite fit some of those policies or those laws. That while sexual harassment is something that can be defined, and you could state that something is sexual harassment, these little things, sometimes they're so little they can't be proven, and so then nothing gets done about them.
Let's get a little bit more personal here. Have you run into the kind of microaggressions that would rise to the level of hate crimes or outright discrimination?
I mean, I'll tell you this, I'm no longer one of People Magazine's hottest bachelors because I got married. And my husband and I—
Congratulations.
Thank you. And my husband and I— oh, you're so sweet. We're registered at honeyfund.com. Thank you. One of the things that we have to deal with on a real life, everyday basis walking around in New York City is determining whether or not we can even hold hands in New York City. I can't hold my husband's hand in public sometimes because we're afraid that if anything, we could be murdered or assaulted, or even that we would have to deal with insults, with looks of disgust, and things that heterosexual people don't have to worry about.
As we saw from the clip that we
Yes.
just saw, that's still. Well, let's turn it over to the audience. I'm sure a lot of you have ideas, maybe even have some experiences about this issue that you'd like to share with us. And what we'd like you to do is ask your questions. I invite you to do that. Don't be shy. Come up to the mic.
Hi, Kevin Nadal. I'm Saad. I'm a second semester freshman here at John Jay. My question to you is, what's the most discriminative or the most racial slur, insult that's been given to you?
Against the LGBT community?
Yeah, or to you personally, whichever.
I mean, I think with LGBT people that there are a lot of different slurs that we might experience. I think people say, things I don't even really want to repeat, but that exist. And so slurs are those things that may or may not necessarily be classified as microaggressions because they're so assaultive and overt and intentional. But some of the language that might be considered more microaggressive are things like when people say, "That's so gay," to connote that something is bad or weird. Why are we even saying that something is so gay? This water bottle can't be that gay. It doesn't have a sexual orientation, right? Why don't we just say, "I don't like this water bottle. It doesn't taste good." Why do we have to say that something's, why do we have to bring up sexual orientation at all? And then with transgender people, particularly, that they experience a lot of different slurs as well. People saying words, and I can say these because I think we should educate people, saying tranny is not an okay thing. Saying she-male, saying that somebody's a he-she is not.
Those aren't okay.
Those are not okay. Those people think that they're fine and acceptable to say, when in reality they're not.
Well, we know John Jay, actually like most universities, it's a pretty liberal place. It's pretty welcoming, it's pretty tolerant. But I'm sure that even at John Jay, there are issues where microaggressions against people of different sexual orientation or outside of the mainstream sexual orientation occur. Have any of you felt any of that? Have you seen some of those instances, maybe with some of your friends that you'd like to talk about? Maybe if you raise your hands, and how many have run into that?
Yeah.
I see about 10 or so hands raised. Does anybody want to come up and talk about that? We have a brave volunteer.
Hi, my name is Anjali. I'm a junior here at John Jay. I'm straight, but I went to fashion high school, high school fashion industry, so I was always surrounded by LGBT community. But something that bothered me here at John Jay was actually last semester. I have this group of heterosexual male friends who every time they have an encounter that seems gay, they do 10 push-ups. Or they push each other to do 10 push-ups. Like, they'll say, "That was homo, do 10 push-ups." How do you, for a person like me who's straight, how do you advise I kind of approach these situations and kind of like shut them down or like tell them that it's not okay?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is when men, either heterosexual men, either say no homo or do things to prove that they're not gay, I think the bottom line is that they feel threatened by their masculinity, or they're threatened that their masculinity is going to be challenged or something like that. And so I think even just mentioning that to men sometimes makes them a little bit more sensitive or aware to that, because now you're pointing out that you know why they're so upset. So to say something to like, "Oh, so you're doing push-ups because you don't want to be perceived as gay. Why are you so uncomfortable with being perceived as gay?" And so for them to say, "No, I don't," and then say like, "Well, a real person who was comfortable with their sexual orientation wouldn't care what other people think, but apparently you do. So that makes me question you."
You can respond.
I mean, it just gets me to think about like bullies, especially bullies like in high school and I imagine even in college too, where they pick on the one frail, weak kid. What's that about? Why are you picking on this kid? Why are you also even assuming that this kid is gay? And even if they are, who cares? Why are you so threatened that this gay kid exists? And I think, this makes me think about some of the research studies that have been emerging where they're finding that heterosexual men who are the most homophobic are actually those that are most aroused by homosexual acts. So they have these experimental designs where they actually measure sexual arousal, and then they make these men, college heterosexual proclaimed men, to watch homosexual porn. Can I say gay porn, right?
Now, if there's anything that's going to get people angry, is a statement like that, I think.
Yeah, but that's what happens, and then so the studies are showing that why are they getting aroused by this versus liberal, open-minded people who aren't homophobic aren't getting aroused by it. So perhaps people who are so uncomfortable with their sexuality, it's because they are uncomfortable because maybe they have some same-sex attractions themselves.
Some more questions. Anybody had really bad experiences on campus or off campus? Yes, please.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
My name is Jill. I just wanted to say with my experiences with microaggressions, it tends to come from a lot of people that I'm close with. Even in like a friend group, they tend to say things like, or actually with the family example, like, how come you don't have a boyfriend yet? Just simple things like that. And I can't tell if they know or they're trying to like a backhanded kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes those are the worst types of microaggressions, those that come from people that are close to you, family members. And a lot of it is because people have what's called heteronormativity, where they assume that heterosexuality is the norm. So asking something that seems harmless, like do you have a boyfriend, to a woman, seems like an everyday question that a heterosexual person wouldn't even think about. Not realizing that when you ask that question to somebody who is not heterosexual, that's actually quite hurtful. It makes a person feel isolated, that you feel different, abnormal, all these sort of things, and then you can't proclaim your identity yourself. That you can't then feel comfortable telling them about your sexual orientation because you already get the sense that they're not LGBT friendly.
That raises another question. Let me ask you: does it worry you more when you face microaggressions by your peers, by people your own age, or by your parents or adults?
I'd say it's tougher when it comes to like parents and adults just because it's so personal that way. You feel like, because I've already told them so they should know, so I feel like a question like that is like a backhanded way of saying more so like, why don't you have a boyfriend?
Right.
Right.
It's especially hard when you've already told them. A lot of LGBT people have come out to their families like 10 times and their families still don't get it. But you're right, I think it is an indirect way of them showing that they're not comfortable with your identity. Thank you.
You have someone here? Yes?
So my name is Amalia, and I'm a grad student here at John Jay. I actually wanted to bring up something that happened yesterday. I was on Facebook, and a friend posted this article that talked about the term girl crush. And the reason why she posted it was because she said that actually offended her because she identifies as part of the LGBTQ community, that when a straight woman uses this term, that it actually really upsets her because it's another way of saying like no homo. I saw later in the day that there were like 20 different posts following after, so I decided, and I don't know why, I may be like masochism, but decided to like read it, and there was someone there a few people actually that were really adamant that this isn't a big deal, like you're just being really sensitive, like you shouldn't feel bad, this is just someone expressing that they like someone, but they also identify as straight. And she went on there explaining that like I don't think it's okay for you to tell me how I should feel about this, how this should affect me. So I just was wondering if Dr. Kevin Nadal, you can talk a little bit more how that can play a role in people's life and how they should address when someone tells you like you're being too sensitive.
See, the problem with microaggressions is that a lot of times they're very ambiguous, innocuous, that people don't realize, or people don't think the same way about them. And as a result of that, people don't realize that there could be lots of interpretations to these experiences. And so while a person may be well-intentioned in saying something like that, like a girl crush, that they don't realize that perhaps it might be offensive to a recipient or a target or somebody who has to observe it. And I think that is one way to approach microaggressions, is to say, okay, I understand that this is not what your intention is, but you have to understand that when you say or do certain things, or whatever the example is, that it offends me, and that's my feeling, and that's my experience. I think The harder part of it is when people will then point the finger at you and say, you are being too sensitive, you are being paranoid. What I think is helpful nowadays is now that there's so much literature and research, empirical research on microaggressions that say that this actually happens and this actually affects people's lives, you have something to back it up with and say, this isn't just a me thing, this is something that many LGBT people experience. And so, to validate that this is how I feel. I think that's one way that we're missing each other, is that we're so intentional on trying to get the person to believe what we're saying, and particularly when it comes to any of these issues, race, gender, sexual orientation, we don't want to be perceived as racist or homophobic, and so I'm going to convince you that I'm not homophobic, as opposed to saying, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that upset you. I may not agree with you, but I'm sorry that I upset you.
Let me ask, we have another question here.
Hey, Kevin. My name's Charlene. I just came through a situation a few weeks ago. I actually told one of my LGBT peers, who I thought she would understand, that I prefer dating lesbians that dress up as males. And she approached with the question as, why? You might as well just date a guy. And it was uncomfortable because she identifies as bisexual. And actually today I spoke to her and I told her that I am open to dating trans as well. And she gave me this weird look like, what, why? And my question to you would be basically, how do you deal with situations like that?
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. I think, one thing that this is a good example of is that LGBT people can microaggress against each other. And I think one of the reasons why LGBT people can microaggress against others is that because we grew up in the same society, so we've learned the same messages that heterosexuals have learned. And so while LGBT people might identify as, lesbian, gay, bisexual, or whatever, transgender, or whatever, that we've still learned what these ideals of what is considered normal or acceptable. So it's okay for you to be gay as long as you're a straight acting gay. It's okay for you to be a lesbian as long as you're a feminine lesbian. We've learned internalized these messages as well. It's okay for you to be trans as long as you pass. And you're taking your hormones or you're undergoing gender-affirming surgeries, it's okay. But if you're in those transition phases, we don't like that. You don't look, whatever, and I don't want to have to deal with you.
Again, that's very typical of any victim of discrimination.
So in dealing with something like this, I think education is important to just say, like, look, I understand that you may be attracted to a certain type of person, but I am attracted or open to all kinds of people, and this is my experience. This is not, something that you can define for me. I am the master of my own life.
Thank you very much. We have another question here.
Hi, my name is Marsha, and with the discussion with my friend of mine, heterosexual friend of mine, she asked me one time, she said, if you're gay and you want to be so different, why do you want the same rights as straight people? And with me being so frustrated and trying to tell her all the other things, to get her to understand me, I just gave up. So how do you keep from giving up?
Yeah. It's tough because I feel like sometimes when there are these arguments that we have, and that the more and more we try to convince the other person that we just want to have the same rights that you have, that it can feel so personal and can feel really overwhelming when they just can't see that. Sometimes microaggressions, I think it's okay to walk away. We mentioned confronting some of these things, but if it's going to cause you a lot of heartache to try to get your point across to somebody that doesn't want to listen, for your own mental health, it might be okay to just walk away from the situation. I'm thinking about a time, like a couple things. One is like you have that homophobic uncle who says a lot of things all the time and you've already corrected him. I think this is a lot of times why LGBT people might sometimes limit some of their relationships with people, and sometimes I think that's okay, because if going back to the same source of hurt is going to cause you additional hurt, then I think it's better to take care of yourself sometimes.
That's a really profound point, I think, to make. Well, let me ask a devil's advocacy question, and then we'll go to the point. You know, a lot of people who, whatever you say, and as you indicated, you know, they're not going to be convinced, and they're going to keep up whatever they think about people who are gay or lesbian or transgender. And there are people who are going to say that, you know, my beliefs prevent me from even accepting that you could be in the same room with me or that you have the same rights as me. How do you react to that?
What I tell them is, like, you know, whatever your religious group is you believe in, I'm sure they've taught you a lot of things that you don't abide by today. So I could take, you know, Catholicism or Christianity, for example, that yes, there's one line in the entire Bible in the Old Testament that says that a man should not lie with another man or he'll be stoned. But there are a lot of other lines in the Bible that say that you shouldn't eat shellfish, that you shouldn't cut your hair, that you're not allowed to shave, that slaves are acceptable, that women need to obey the man, and those are unacceptable things in our society that people have learned are unacceptable. So why are we holding on to that one line? And I think, you know, we can't use religion as an excuse anymore when it's really a social justice issue. If any community is being oppressed, we need to make sure that that community, that their voices are heard, that their rights are valued, and that we do everything that we can to ensure that their lives are just as humane and satisfactory as everyone else's.
So where can people go if they need help? Or they want to find out a bit more?
Yeah, so we actually have at John Jay, we have an LGBT task force. The link to the website is up here. And on this webpage, we have resources on campus, people that you can go to talk about LGBT issues, professors that do research involving LGBT issues. We have the student club, the LGBT student club here on campus that you can go to and meet peers to talk about these sorts of issues. And we also have community issues or community organizations that you can go to. So the LGBT Center in New York City is the largest and oldest LGBT center in the country and in the world, as well as places like the Anti-Violence Project. New York City's Anti-Violence Project is a place that you can go to if you're ever assaulted or attacked because of your LGBT status.
Kevin, thank you so much.
Thanks,
It's been
Steve.
great to have you here.